Yo, turn on captions or annotations. Look in the description. Anyway, welcome to the final bonus episode finale of Let's Play Sorcerian. For this episode, we're going to be playing Drastic Triathlon, which appropriately enough is the final adventure on the last chronologically released Sorcerian expansion. As far as editing and music, this is not going to be as high a quality production as the rest of the LP, but I hope the subtitles and the sheer spectacle will make up for it. Speaking of the subtitles, I want to give a super big thanks to Blonde Robin, who translated everything you're going to see here. So, round of applause everybody, excellent work. Anyway, let's get down to the field and watch the action. The party that I'm using for this is made up of two hacked characters that were on the Sorcerian disc image that I had. They're all pretty well max stats and immortal, and they've got like hacked jokey items. The other two characters are my own, and I had to do a little bit of raising to get them to where they needed to be. If you noticed on the adventure description, it hints that you need 4 specific jobs, just like in Romancia where you needed a fortune teller and a doctor. The biggest hurdle I had getting a successful party together was the bone crafter job. After a bunch of trial and error, I finally figured out that to take that job you need to be an old dwarf with 20 plus dexterity. This is being played on a PC-88 emulator, which is generally sort of the inferior version, but for this adventure there aren't really any changes. And the scenario disc that this is from is Selected Sorcerian Volume 5. The Selected Sorcerians only had 2 adventures each. They are listed as Takeru scenarios, which apparently was a vending machine system where you take a blank floppy disk and make your selection and it writes it for you. About 1/3 of the Sorcerian content was released on Takeru. I don't know if it was exclusive or not. Here is the Busty Gals team that we heard about at the start of the race. The first member is Rhea from the Lost Talisman. Then there's Kiala from the Cursed Oasis, Princess Zenobia from the Tower of Thieves, and Karen from the Cursed Medusa. Although in the English version she was called Anna. I'll shut up for a minute here so you can better hear the rousing field day theme we got going on. This is obviously enough the old folks team. They're not anybody we've met before, but we are about to run into a couple familiar old guys. I did want to do some extra special thanks in addition to what I did at the end of Fight Dragon. First of all, I couldn't have done the LP at all without the Sorcerian data room. It is a really great website that has literally all of the information. Another important resource was the one FAQ on GameFAQs, which is written by Dammit9X. And finally, I think for real this time, I want to thank Research Indicates for being an inspiration, and consenting to let me write a paper about him for my radio and TV production final. I also want to mention that even though I've been posting iTunes links to Falcom Sound Team JDK, they do have an Amazon MP3 presence, but it doesn't have really any Sorcerian stuff outside of a couple compilation albums, which is too bad because iTunes is a giant piece of shit. Well, even though the Royal Magician is still pretty much a dickhead, our friend Orther from The Dark Magician is here once again to teleport us. The anywhere door we're going to use here in Japanese is a Dokodemo door, and that's a reference to the classic kids anime Doraemon. Blonde Robin pointed that out, and he should be an expert on it because you see the same thing in Reset Tier. I've got a translator note here on this line about standing swimming. It means to tread water, but it's probably a joke based on the fact that you swim standing up in Sorcerian. One of the things you might notice about the PC-88 version, as compared to the DOS version, is that the sound effects are way better. This adventure is not really the best venue to hear the sound effects, because not much goes on other than talking, but they actually use one or two channels of the FM audio, as opposed to a PC speaker. This is, of course, one of the good old Krakens from Lucifer's Floodgate. You know, the music in this part is not very good, and it's going to go on for a while. I think I'm going to edit something else in here. That's better. This is an arrangement of the main theme from the first adventure of the first Sorcerian expansion. It's called Demonic Isle, off of Falcom Special Box 89. If you couldn't tell, there's no real challenge to the swimming event. Really, assuming you get the jobs you need, there's not much challenge to this whole thing, other than the part that's coming right up. I don't know if I was getting something wrong as far as the timing, but this rock climbing bit is pretty difficult. I was actually very tired at the end of it. You just have to mash on 8 and 2 on the numeric keypad. And this is me catching my breath. We're pretty high up at this point, I would say about as high as the Garden of the Gods. Yep, that's exactly where we are. That was the one and only cut you'll see in this video, because to my eternal shame, I couldn't do this without save stating like 10 times. It's the Sorcerian quiz with your host, Jupiter. If you get any one of these questions wrong, you have to climb the mountain again, and I didn't want to do that. These questions involve some pretty minute details. I just checked, and the first herb in Riddle of the Red Jewel is hyssop. This one's easy enough if you can read it, because Toad was the guy in the dungeon. The silver sword has cure, not heal. This one could trick you, especially on the PC-88, because the original version only had 6. I don't know how you're supposed to know this one, but I think it's more of a qualifier for events that are going to happen later. Another translator's note here. They're referring to the Garotine from the Tower of Thieves, but it was probably meant to be Galatine, which is something from Arthurian myth. It's a little shameful, since Sierra, I think, did make a King Arthur game. Anyway, I apologize for my complete lack of effort on hiding the emulator stuff here, but I didn't want to desync the sound too bad, and I didn't want to run the whole adventure again because there's a bigger pool of questions to choose from, and I would have had to use save states again anyway. Now, on the other hand, the music in this part is pretty good. It's kind of a medley of different themes from Sorcerian. And that being said, I'm just gonna let it play for a minute because I don't have half an hour's worth of commentary. Come on. Well, that's been one full loop of the song, and I've got something to talk about now. If you don't have a thief in this part, you have to retire because you're stuck in the room, and you just get to walk out of the quest with a ballpoint pen. You can equip it as a weapon, but it doesn't have any enchantments on it. And by the way, the evil shaman does say ultra super gorgeous delicious in English in katakana, so that's not any kind of translation embellishment there. This next bit is not terribly interesting, or funny, or complicated, so I'll just do kind of a LP post-mortem. You know, it's been a positive experience overall, a lot of fun. I think it's a really cool way to express your love for a game. Not much audience participation, but without an audience, I don't think I would have had the drive to get better at video editing and just make the whole thing better overall, so that was good. I feel like episode 4 or 5 is where I really started to kind of come into my own as far as editing and developing my own voice and style. Prior to that, it was kind of a nervous undertaking for me, as most things in my life are. But in the end, it developed into something that I'm proud of, and I'd like to do again. The thing is, Sorcerian was pretty much a perfect storm for me to LP. Just a combination of different stuff I could put in it, nostalgia, it had never been done. So it's been kind of difficult to come up with another game that I think I could do justice to in the same way. Some of the thoughts I had were like Tecmo's Deception, King's Field, ActRaiser, Goonies 2, but you heard it here first. I think I finally settled on UN Squadron, which is based on like my favorite manga of all time, Area 88, and I have an abiding love of 1980s military aviation, so I think there's enough different angles there that I could get some interesting content out of a relatively short game. Even though it's been done before, but the videos seem to have disappeared from the internet. We'll see if I get around to it anyway. I think that's enough self-indulgence for now. In the meantime, we have become panty thieves, because anime. We do have a lead on a pair of panties. If you remember, Anna moved to Pentower recently, and lives in a red brick house. And according to the quiz, she is 18, so there's not going to be any creepy pedo feelings associated with it. Sadly, both beggar and thief are helpless to get any underwear from these spectators. It looks like we found Karen/Anna's house. How lucky that it would be on this particular stretch of the race. Again, we have to use the thief to get in here. I'm gonna go ahead and splice in another song here. This one is The Choice Is Yours from Sorcerian Super Arrange 2. It's the menu theme of the Sorcerian utility disc. The theme of perverted old dudes stealing panties is actually an archetypal, race memory, and Joseph Campbell has written about it in The Hero with a Thousand Faces. So it was actually really forward-thinking and intellectual of Falcom to include this segment in the game and not skeezy or stupid or anything. This last leg of the treasure hunt marathon, where we have to find the Vetus jerky, is a little boring. And one recurring sentiment in the thread was that maybe Sorcerian is actually a bad game, so I want to talk about that. So, is it a good game? I can't say categorically yes. Mainly because the nicest thing you can really say about the Sierra version is it doesn't crash. Mechanically, it's not a bad port, but the audio is so much worse. And of course, it's lacking in the expansion department. But even with just the base 15 adventures, there's a really big variety of environments and stuff to do. I can't think of another action RPG, let alone one that gives you this much freedom to build your characters, that has 15 plus bosses, and something like 60 songs. Even if they're not as compositionally impressive as the Japanese version, they're all more or less catchy. But yeah, holy shit, this game is good, and unique in a lot of ways. I think, though, that playing it when it came out in America, and now in a modern environment, we miss out on a lot of the experience in different ways. We've seen plenty of examples of just kind of bullshit puzzle design, and that's really what I think drags the game down in a lot of people's eyes. And that's fair. But I've read a lot about Tower of Jiraga, which is a Namco arcade pseudo-RPG, I guess, that also has just really, really obscure puzzles on every floor of the game. And it ended up creating kind of this puzzle-solving community thing where people would leave notes on the arcade cabinets, which obviously now a lot of people compare to Dark Souls. But I think that Sorcerian was sort of designed with that kind of community in mind, and that's really what we missed out on in America. Not that many people had it, and the people who did couldn't really communicate pre-internet. But what ends up happening now is you get stuck and you check an FAQ, and you're just like, wow, that's stupid, and you move on. But I don't know, I think that's a big problem with gaming in general nowadays. Basically, I think what I'm trying to say is if you lived in Japan in the 90s, then Sorcerian was a fucking classic. If you got the Sierra version, though, probably not much more than an especially memorable curiosity. At this point, anyway, we're finally done with the scavenger hunt race, and we can move on to the dance contest. Sadly, there is no rhythm-based minigame. That would have been way ahead of its time. But to explain the joke here, it's a samba contest, which is a type of dance, if you didn't know. And the Japanese word for midwife is sanba. So the midwife needs to dance the samba. The samba. Get it? That was hot. Coincidentally, this is another archetypal race memory thing. All old Japanese RPGs have to have really awkward dance sequences. According to Sorcerian Data Room, these three judge guys correspond to staff members on the game. For whatever reason, we seem to have passed muster here, and at this point we can move on to the boss battle. Or at least what passes for a boss battle in this wacky world. pretty good boss music anyway. This brick building is a grocery store, and we don't need anything from here yet, so be back later. It's the fire elemental from the Missing Magician. Well, it looks like this is going to be a battle of wits rather than swords. Nothing to do now but head back to the grocery store and hopefully find some kind of tool. And he certainly is a tool. I guess the blame in this situation is really on us. Well, we got a bucket out of that, and we did pass over a river on the way here, so we can go back and fill it up. Oh, I'm spent. I have nothing more to say about Sorcerian. I'm done. I've been distracting you from Blonde Robin's subtitle work long enough, I think. For a gag boss, we get gag XP. There's only one thing between us and the goal now, and that's the old folks team. Here we can choose whether or not to give them the medicine that we originally got for the evil shaman. And of course, on my first playthrough, I had no damn idea what they were talking about, so this was a save state situation, and I'm glad I did. Well, even if you have all the classes and you do everything right, you can still lose the race at this point if you say yes. You still get the ball pen for a consolation prize, but the old folks give you the old folks robe, which has rejuvenate on it, and that's a spell that I never really discussed. What it does is it reduces the age of the first person in the party by 1 year, but it also reduces their stats pretty drastically. So apart from immortality, it's the only way to get around aging. Nothing to do now but go home with the sad ballpoint pen of a loser. The miracle never happened. Obviously we're not going to stand for this, so let's load state and see what happens if we do it right. Just call us Team No Respect. The king? We finally get to meet the king of Pentawa in the flesh. This is the most exciting day of my life. That's a pretty hefty reward, but if you've played Sorcerian this long, you probably don't really need it. We may be getting in over our head here. I bet you didn't see that coming. That does it for the LP though. Wrapped up 100% now, everything I wanted to do. Thank you all for watching. I hope you had some laughs, hope you learned something, and I hope we see each other again in my next project, whatever and whenever it may be. Good journey, Sorcerians.